When bank employees returned to work on Monday morning, August 8, 2005, they found a hole in the floor of one of Brazil's most secure vaults. Not a blast mark. Not a shattered door. A hole. Cut cleanly through more than a meter of reinforced concrete and iron, opening downward into darkness. And when they shone a light into that darkness, they saw something nobody was prepared for. A tunnel. Fully lit. Lined with wooden support beams, stretching back into the earth for hundreds of feet. And at the end of it, 3.5 tons of cash, roughly $70 million, simply gone. But here's what made investigators stop cold. Scattered throughout that tunnel, investigators found juice cartons, energy drink cans, the remnants of meals eaten underground. Not the debris of a single frantic night. The evidence of months. Someone had been living under the bank. This is the story of the Banco Central burglary. And what makes it one of the most studied heists in modern history isn't just the money. It's the patience. Fortaleza, Brazil. A coastal city in the northeast, known for beaches and heat that can make the pavement shimmer by mid-morning. In early 2005, a small house appeared for rent on a quiet residential street. Exactly 1 block from the regional headquarters of Banco Central. Brazil's central bank, the institution responsible for storing and distributing currency for the entire region. The house was unremarkable. Single story, tucked between other homes on a street where neighbors knew each other's routines. But shortly after someone rented it, the house got a fresh coat of green paint. A van appeared outside, parked there most days, with a logo painted on the side, Grama Sintética, synthetic grass, a landscaping company. Neighbors started receiving flyers, friendly, professional, advertising lawn services at competitive rates. A few people even called the number. The business seemed legitimate. The people who worked there were polite. And for 3 months, nobody questioned what was happening behind that freshly painted door. Because behind that door, there was no landscaping happening at all. Inside the house, a crew of roughly 40 people were working in shifts. Not above ground, below it. They were digging a tunnel, and not some crude hole scraped through dirt with shovels in desperation. This was engineering. The tunnel ran nearly 256 feet, starting beneath the house and stretching directly under a regional stock exchange building, ending precisely beneath the vault of the Banco Central branch 1 block away. It was dug 3 meters underground, deep enough to avoid detection, shallow enough to be manageable. Wooden support beams lined the walls to prevent collapse. Electric lighting was strung the entire length so the crew could see what they were doing. And because Fortaleza's heat is punishing even above ground, they installed air conditioning. Not a fan. A working air conditioning system running underground so the diggers could work in shifts for months without suffocating. How do you hide the evidence of digging a tunnel under a city street? You don't haul it out all at once. You do it slowly, quietly. 30 tons of excavated soil, removed in bags, a little at a time, carried out in a landscaping van that nobody thought twice about because landscaping companies haul dirt. That's what they do. It took 3 months. And in all that time, no neighbor reported hearing anything unusual. No one called the police. No one noticed the van making slightly more trips than a small landscaping company might reasonably need. The operation was invisible. On the weekend of August 6th and 7th, 2005, the crew reached the vault. Breaking through the floor wasn't quick. The barrier separating the tunnel from the money above was more than a meter thick. Reinforced concrete and iron, designed to withstand exactly this kind of intrusion. But they had time. The bank was closed. The building was empty. And they had planned for this. When they finally broke through and climbed up into the vault, they found what they came for: cash. Stacked in neat, uniform bundles, roughly 3.5 tons of it, close to $70 million in Brazilian currency. There was no alarm, no confrontation, no violence. They simply loaded the money into their van and left. And for 2 full days, nobody knew. When the theft was discovered that Monday morning, investigators were faced with a crime scene that seemed almost impossible. The vault's security systems hadn't been bypassed. They'd been irrelevant. The thieves never touched the door. They came from below, from a direction no security camera was pointed, through a tunnel nobody knew existed. The sophistication was staggering. But what followed was less a clean getaway than a slow, bloody unraveling. 4 days after the robbery, 2 men were arrested, driving a car transport truck. Inside, investigators found a small portion of the stolen money. It was the first break. But it also revealed something troubling. The crew was already fragmenting. More arrests followed in scattered locations. Over the next several months, cash was recovered in stashes, one buried in a house hundreds of kilometers from Fortaleza, another hidden in a location investigators never disclosed publicly. By the end of 2005, only a fraction of the $70 million had been recovered, and only a handful of the estimated 25 people involved had been caught. But that wasn't the strangest part. In October 2005, just 2 months after the heist, the body of Luis Fernando Ribeiro was found abandoned on a rural road, hundreds of miles from Fortaleza. Ribeiro was believed by investigators to be one of the operation's masterminds. He had been kidnapped, while his family paid a substantial ransom. And even after the ransom was delivered, his captors killed him anyway. It was the first death. It wouldn't be the last. Over the following months, police uncovered at least 6 more kidnappings connected to figures involved in the heist. In each case, the pattern was the same. Someone tied to the robbery was abducted. A ransom was demanded. Families paid. And in some cases, the victim was killed regardless. What does that tell you? It tells you that once word spread about the scale of the money stolen, the thieves themselves became targets. Other criminals, people who had nothing to do with the original heist, began hunting the crew, looking to seize a share of a fortune that was never meant to be traceable in the first place. The $70 million had become a beacon, and everyone involved was suddenly vulnerable. But it gets worse. Evidence surfaced suggesting that members of the police force itself had taken part in some of these kidnappings. Several officers were later arrested in connection with the abductions. The line between law enforcement and organized crime, in this case, had blurred to the point of invisibility. In October 2006, the body of another suspect linked to the robbery was found in a Sao Paulo favela. The details of his death were never fully disclosed, but the message was clear. Being part of the Banco Central heist had become a death sentence. So who was behind it? Investigators eventually identified several figures they believed were central to the plot. A leader known by the nickname Alemão, German. An alleged mastermind referred to as Tatuzão, Big Armadillo, a name that seemed almost mocking given the tunnel they'd dug. An engineer who designed the tunnel itself, and later escaped custody in 2011, vanishing before he could stand trial. But there was another detail that investigators couldn't ignore. A Banco Central security employee was implicated, accused of providing internal information that made the operation possible. Floor plans, security schedules, the kind of knowledge you don't get from studying blueprints, the kind you get from someone on the inside. The theory? and it remains a theory, never fully confirmed, is that the thieves knew far more about the vault's blind spots than planning alone could explain. Was that someone working within the bank itself had helped them. That this wasn't just a feat of engineering. It was a betrayal. Even a local mayor was eventually implicated, accused of helping finance part of the operation. The web of involvement stretched further than anyone initially suspected. Despite well over 100 arrests made in the years that followed, and tens of millions of reais eventually recovered, the majority of the $70 million taken that weekend has never been found. Investigators believe as many as 18 people involved in the original operation were never identified or caught at all. Think about that. 40 people working in shifts for 3 months, hauling 30 tons of soil, installing lights and air conditioning underground, loading 3.5 tons of cash into a van, and nearly half of them simply walked away, their identities unknown, their share of the money unrecovered. Where did it go? Some investigators believe it was laundered through legitimate businesses over the years, cleaned slowly, a little at a time, so it would never trigger suspicion. Others think it's buried, hidden in locations only a handful of people know, waiting to be retrieved when the attention finally fades. And some believe it was taken by the very people who kidnapped and killed the original crew. That the money changed hands violently, passed from thief to thief, until it ended up in places and with people investigators never even thought to look. None of these theories have ever been confirmed. 2 decades later, the house on that quiet street in Fortaleza is gone, torn down, replaced. But the tunnel's existence is a matter of public record. Photographs of it were published. Investigators walked its length, measuring, documenting, trying to understand how something so elaborate could be built in secret beneath a city street without anyone noticing. The Banco Central burglary is still studied in law enforcement and security courses around the world, not because of the violence, there was almost none, but because of the patience. 3 months of careful, silent engineering for a single weekend's work, and a fortune that, for most of the people involved, seems to have vanished as completely as if it had never existed at all. But here's the question nobody's answered. If you could steal $70 million and never be caught, would you be able to spend it? Would you trust the people you stole it with not to turn on you the moment the pressure mounted? Would you be able to live quietly, knowing that every criminal in the country now saw you as a walking jackpot? Or would you end up like Luis Fernando Ribeiro, ransom paid, body abandoned, the money you stole used as bait to lure someone else into the same trap? Somewhere, someone still knows where that money is. Somewhere, a portion of $70 million sits hidden, waiting. And somewhere, the people who took it are still looking over their shoulders, wondering if the tunnel they dug led them to a fortune or to a grave they just haven't reached yet. The hole in the vault floor has long since been repaired, but the hole in the case remains wide open. Maji, that concludes tonight's case from Soggy Matchbox. Some mysteries are eventually solved. Others, it seems, are destined to remain in the dark. If you'd like to uncover more cases like these, make sure you're subscribed, because some things just need one more strike before they finally catch. Until next time.